Union of European Federalists. Hello and welcome to our look behind the curtains of the Russian invasion into the Ukraine. We want to understand why Putin is attacking the country and what he actually tries to achieve by conquering the Ukraine. We will discuss Russia's arguments as well as the Western world's perspectives, concerns, and reactions. A warm welcome at this point to the man who knows it all, Professor for Political Sciences, Dr. Dirk van den Boom. Thank you for your precious time.
My pleasure.
On the other hand, accompanying the conflict, we also see a wave of solidarity towards the Ukraine and all across Europe these days. Money is being raised, shelters are being built, medical supplies are sent, refugees are being prepared for and cared for. And there are many other solidarity acts like phone companies making phone calls with the Ukraine for free, or the Deutsche Bahn transporting people from the Ukraine for free. So that's why we also want to shed some light on the different ways to this that the civil society can help and what organizations like the European NGOs such as JEF can do to help. And with us here, therefore, is also Antonio Argenziano, President of JEF Europe, the Young European Federalists. Hello and welcome.
Hi, everyone.
So first things first, let's dive into the background of this war. Dr. van den Boom. Putin mainly argues with security reasons. He claims to want to denazify and demilitarize the Ukraine because Ukraine would pose a threat to Russians within the country. Another security-related argument of his is that the NATO would threaten Russia because they stationed military in neighboring countries such as Poland. As Western countries, we simply don't see those threats at all. Nobody's interested in a war against Russia. We all want to live in peace, get our gas and oil, perhaps even make business. So if the West doesn't want to provoke conflict, what really stands behind these Russian aggressions? And when and where did this whole conflict actually begin? Why have both sides, Russia and the West, been upgrading the armed forces? So many questions. Please explain.
Well, it's a complex situation. And of course, we are all having very many questions. And in some cases, we have answers, and in some we still lack. So first of all, it's very important to say that actually President Putin and the Kremlin never have been intransparent. They have always been very open and clear about their objectives and motivations. Mr. Putin has done a lot of interviews. He has published a lot of articles in newspapers. And he has spokespersons who have talked on different venues about the plans of the Russian Federation's security policy and foreign policy. So we couldn't be surprised. Maybe we didn't believe him, but we couldn't be surprised. And one of the basic foundations of all of it is that he is of the opinion that the breakup of the Soviet Union was a historical mistake, and that all the countries of the former Soviet Union are in the direct sphere of influence of the Russian Federation, and nothing should happen there without consent from Moscow. And that is one very basic foundation. So anytime something happens which kind of brings this into danger, Russia intervenes. They intervened in Georgia when Georgia was leaning more towards the West. They intervened in Moldova when Moldova raised its hand and said, we want to join the European Union. He intervened in Kazakhstan when the regime there was shaky. He intervened in Belarus when the dictator was shaky. And he intervened in the Ukraine already much earlier, when it was clear that the revolution there sent away his puppet, elected a new democratically elected president, and then again Ukraine was leaning towards the West, and he, in his view, had to do something. And the first step was the annexation of the Crimea, and now the second step is in the end to include Ukraine as historical Russian homeland back into the fold of the Russian Federation. So this is there's like a very clear, distinctive strategy, a very clear, distinctive idea of a greater Russia, an imperial idea, if you want to say so, behind it, and it has never been hidden. And that is very important, and that is maybe the failure of us, that we never really listened to him because he was always very open about it. So everyone who listened and believed him couldn't be surprised about what is happening in the Ukraine right now.
So two more questions on that topic. the actual threat for Putin, Mr. Putin, is it the Western democracy that is his major enemy, or what is it actually? Because the West itself wouldn't be aggressive by themselves.
Well, he sees in his own country that the Western ideas are taking hold, especially in the urban areas, in the educated middle class. There are many people who think that the autocratic system of the Russian Federation is not the one they want to live in. Uh, the transformation of the Russian economy has brought a lot of Western goods into the country, a lot of Western lifestyles, and together with that, also some ideas of how maybe probably a state should be better organized than just being a big kleptocracy run by oligarchs and on the top, the president himself. And this is, of course, a threat to his rule. It is a threat to the idea he has about the ideal authoritarian state, and it is a threat towards his vision of a renewed and reformed Russian empire, just under a different name. And this internal threat is, of course, something which comes from the outside. It comes from the West. And yes, indeed, he regards everything even remotely democratic as a direct threat to Russian hegemony, because once you open freedom of expression, freedom of will, freedom of political participation, people would, in most cases, not choose someone like him.
So there comes the last question for you. At this point, if we follow the thread of thoughts, actually, his attack won't stop with the Ukraine. Does he really want back the old Soviet Union?
In a way, he does, yes, and he will. If he's not stopped, he will use every chance to do that. He has already more or less basically occupied Belarus. The last developments show clearly that the current government there is not nothing more than a puppet government, and he tries to do the same in the Asian states. It is interesting that some of the former Soviet states, like Kazakhstan, which he just rescued, have not followed his lead in this crisis. Others, like Azerbaijan, are supporting Ukraine with free fuel, for example, which is also something which is notable. So he has the approach that he wants to do it, but the forces within the states coming out of the Soviet Union are different, and they are going into different directions. And in the end, we have to see that, and maybe one day also the Russian leadership will accept the fact that the resources the Russian Federation has are not sufficient to keep all these former Soviet states under the kind of firm control they are striving for.
Thank you for these first insights. We will come back to more insights a bit later, but for now we switch to the bit of brighter side of this conflict, if we may say so, to acts of solidarity and to Mr. Argenziano. More than 100,000 people demonstrated end of February last weekend for peace in Berlin. Several thousand did the same in Vienna and in many, many other European cities. To your opinion, what can be gained by thousands of people on the street? What results do demonstrations bring, in your opinion?
Well, I guess that what happened in the last day was an incredible wave of solidarity, because as you said, it was in basically all over Europe. Demonstration happened also in Malta, happened in Oslo, happened everywhere, because Europe is already way beyond the European Union borders. And Ukraine is Europe as well. And this is the message that all the European leaders got. And so if you take into account the first sanctions were sanctions also a bit shy, but this public opinion pressure, thanks to the people in the square, actually made the sanctions increase. So the effective was massive, and this what happened in these last days showed what the European Union should look like, and still is not. Is comparable to what happened with Next Generation EU. We realized that the European Union was not enough, had not enough instruments to tackle the pandemic, and now and so they come out with incredible plan to actually to look at the future, to look at younger generation, and so on, to invest on the future. And this time, the political investment is on European citizens, on protecting European people, and I think that the role of this demonstration is being huge. and it will be huge because now every every European leader knows that the public opinion is at their side, and of course, a lot of the chief of governments was afraid of the sanctions. Germany was very afraid of the sanctions. Italy was very afraid of the sanctions because of the importance of gas exported from Russia, for example, in the countries. But now they know that people, of course, will complain at a certain point because it happens, but the public opinion is on their side, is backing their decision. That's been very important also politically.
Thank you very much for this first perspective from your side. Mr. van den Boom, let's talk a bit about the legal situation. Ukraine is a sovereign country and Russia is violating international law by its invasion, not to mention violating human rights by its attacks. These facts cause a cry for countermeasures in the Western world, but obviously they can't or don't want to go directly into war, which might pose a risk to provoke World War III. On the other hand, Putin does not seem to care about international right at all. So what are the legal countermeasures that can be taken by the UN, by the NATO, and or the EU?
Well, if we talk about international law, then we see in this crisis right now the central weakness of the UN system, and that is a Security Council which can be paralyzed at any time if one of the permanent members puts in his veto. And of course, the Russian Federation has vetoed everything that was put against them in regard to the Ukraine, and they don't even need to have an explanation or a justification for that. They can simply do that. The moment the UN Security Council is not capable of coming to a conclusion, the UN as a system cannot really do much, because everything that follows has to be based on a decision of the Security Council. And one of the, I think, consequences we have to discuss again, and we have done that many times, but again, is the question in how far we can, and we have to reform the UN system so that these kind of stalemates cannot happen again in the future. And I think the question of a reform of the Security Council, a reform and maybe a new kind of composition of the Security Council should be put at the forefront as well, because it's a very obvious thing that the way it is, it cannot work and will not work. So there will be no legal reprimand of the Russian Federation's action. I mean, the General Assembly can make a decision, but that is non-binding. That's just a proclamation, and it is a symbolic act which might be good and helpful, and I support it. But in the end, in regard to international law, there's nothing much we can do actually at this point of time. Also, that the same goes for NATO. NATO is restricted first and foremost to the question, we have to defend our member states, and they are taking steps to actually do that by strengthening the eastern borders and the security installations there. But they are, of course, very, very careful to get into an open conflict directly with nuclear power, because we don't know what the state of mind of Mr. Putin is. There are many rumors and speculations going around which I will not partake in. But there's also this inherent danger that if certain red lines are crossed, that in fact nuclear weapons might be used, and we want to avoid that by all means. So no, again, in this case, NATO cannot directly interfere, will not directly interfere. There will be no fly zone, despite the fact that it has been asked for many times. This is not like a conflict like where we are fighting in a third country with other forces which are indirectly supported. This is a direct intervention of the Russian Federation, and NATO will not directly interfere in such a way that they will provoke an acceleration of this war. So again, there's not much we can do aside from what is already being done. And already this is much more than I have expected. Therefore, we are already more or less at the limit of what is possible, and we have now to see if at all the negotiations which have recently started between the two varying factions will lead, at least in a first step, to a truce, so that the shelling and the indiscriminate killing of civilians will stop, and that help can come into the country to get people out of the rubble and to strengthen the health system and all these kind of things. And then maybe have some breathing space to enter into serious negotiations, which will hopefully come to a conclusion. But that's all that we can at this point of time hope for.
Talking about what can be done to help the Ukraine, Mr. Argenziano, there are many ways to show solidarity and to act helpful on the individual level. But what can organizations such as the JEF, the Young European Federalists, do to help and to support?
Well, first of all, let me just stress what the professor just said. A possible solution for this crisis is not legal, it's political. And that's the whole point. And that's also the big limit of the European Union right now, is that there's not the possibility to have a comprehensive and unique political statement, political solution for the crisis. That's the thing. Said that, and I think that a way to help Ukraine is also keep repeating this concept, because this crisis with a political European Union would never happen, because Putin would have never dared to do that. This is a fact, I think, and we should keep repeating it. On the more coming back to the emergency, of course, we need to be active in three ways, I think. First of all, to keep this topic at the top of the agenda, because it will happen soon. Now, of course, it's easy in a way to talk about Ukraine. In a week, it won't be easy anymore, because time passes, and what's a tragedy now will become normal in a few days. And so what activists need to do is to keep the attention eye to Ukraine, keep demonstrating, keep being in the street, keep pushing. Second is to donate. Could be goods, could be just money. So to stay in touch with Ukrainian people, with Ukrainian organizations, there are a lot of them, and try to share also practically the solidarity, applying for hosting refugees that are now coming. Millions of people are now coming from Ukraine and will come more and more. So this is also very helpful. And last but not least, let's keep reminding to us all, to everyone in the political debate, that what's at stake now is not just the future of Ukraine, it's the future of the European project itself. Because we started 70 years ago, more or less, saying that Europe had to be the land of peace, and this not happened. And this not happened for Ukraine. It didn't happen for the Balkans, and so on. So I think that also calling, as I was saying at the beginning, calling for a political solution, long-term solution, not just for emergency response, will be very important to help and to see some change.
A big wake-up call. Thank you so much. Mr. van den Boom, the conflict reaches us directly on the individual level sooner or later. For example, Europe is highly dependent on Russia's oil and gas. Austria depends about 80% on it. Germany between 40 and 50.
Yeah, 55 around, yes.
The oil and the gas, it's a bit different, but all between 40 and 55. Yeah. On the other hand, Russia also needs that income, because resources is more or less all they got. So how can two parties fight when they depend that much on one another? Why doesn't the economical interconnectedness is enough for peace?
No, it's not, because politics is more than economics. We sometimes think, and that is of course very much coming from the more left tradition of political thinking, that politics is very much depending on economics in such a way that it is forming and dominating politics. But there are other influences at stake. There are cultural influences, there are historical influences, there is the actions of individuals. If you scrutinize and make an analysis of what's happening in international politics, you will be surprised how much is influenced by the whims and will of individual stakeholders who at a certain point of time make an individual decision, and this shapes the whole history of a country or the outcome of a war or whatever. And the more autocratic you have systems, the more important is the individual stakes someone has and the willingness to say no. There's a difference if you have a dictator who sees the light at the end and says, okay, I'm stopping here, or he doesn't. And this difference can really make the outcome of a conflict very, very difficult. So I think that there are more influences than just economics. And the Russian Federation has clearly foreseen the sanctions. They have built a huge stockpile of foreign reserves, which are now in danger because as much as they are in foreign countries, on foreign banks, there seems to be now efforts to freeze them, which is very good. But they have also huge reserves in raw materials and so on. They have tried to prepare very much because they expected the economic fallout. And we will see if their preparations will have been enough. There might be indications that for the beginning, yes, and maybe, but if we keep it up for a little bit longer, it might bite much more than they probably have expected. But it really seems that the Russian leadership said, okay, there's economics, and that is important, but we have goals which are more important than economics, and therefore we are ready to pay the economic cost of what we are doing. And here the political will diverges very much from any kind of rational approach in regard to the damage economically which might arise now.
This leads us to the question of how effective the EU measures actually can be. Just to give a short summary, they include so far the freezing of money and assets, the limitation of traveling, giving 500 million euros for weapons and gear to the Ukraine, closing the airspace for Russian aircrafts, closing Russian media like RT and Sputnik, or letting refugees live without asylum procedure in the EU for 3 years. There's also an energy sector ban, and the free trade agreements are suspended, just to mention some of those measures. How effective do you see them? Do you think they can change Mr. Putin's mind?
I don't think so. They're not really geared towards Mr. Putin, because I don't think that anyone is really of the opinion that he is in a state of mind where he will see reason. I think they are geared on two different directions. One is the general population of the Russian Federation, hoping that they will be so annoyed and devastated and affected by these sanctions that they will do whatever is in their capability to effect regime change. Not necessarily the general population, but also the elites, those who are suffering because they cannot fly to Monaco anymore and do other nice things they could have done before, and who might decide, okay, maybe if we want to preserve our very good position in this country, we have to do something about what is happening right now, and maybe they have an influence. And the second thing is that we get prepared for these kind of things much better than we do, and that is inside. So if we talk about changing our energy policy, that is something that is something to do with us, with our autonomy, energy autonomy. It has to do with the question, can we change the way we work together? We can build a European electricity net which is really working for the benefit of everyone, and which is much less prone to attacks from the outside. So these kind of things which have been discussed all the time, and there are some baby steps have been taken. I don't want to dismiss it completely, but we have missed so many opportunities after the end of the Cold War. We have missed the opportunity of integrating our power grids properly. We have missed the opportunity to get our dependency on foreign gas and oil reserves reduced. We have missed the opportunity to build a common security policy. We have missed the opportunity to build up European armed forces. We have missed so many opportunities, which have been there on the paper after the Cold War. And maybe this is now an awakening, and I really hope so, that we can now take up that which we have missed and do it faster than we otherwise would have been, which means we will make mistakes. Don't forget that. We're doing things very fast now, and there will be mistakes. Yes, and we have to sit down and then discuss about these mistakes, and we have to defend the idea despite the mistakes. That will be a big topic also for the European movement, because there will be mistakes, and there will be blunders, and there will be things going awry. And we have to, and it's a duty to say, okay, yes, this didn't go well, and we have to criticize it, but the basic idea behind it is very good. So we have to defend this basic idea. And this will be a big task in the future. And I see that is a positive step. In a way, if you want to have any positive outcome about these conflicts, that we might have now learned that this change within the European Union is imperative.
The European project is a project and needs constantly to be worked on. Yes. Thank you for that positive outlook. Mr. Argenziano, especially young people might gain their political information through social media, not through classical education. You yourself studied modern history and specialized in European integration. Today, when we look into the world of media, there seems to be also a war of who tells the truth, or who is just diverting society by promoting fake news or disinformation. How important would you think are measures like shutting down media like RT that are known for their pro-Russian disinformation, shutting down them in Europe? Do you think that has an effect?
Well, yes. I think that all the fight against disinformation, against fake news, is very, very important on the social media and in general in the media. It's not that fake news were invented when Facebook was invented or Twitter was invented. Fake news existed, and indeed, actually, also the news that are going on in the Russian public televisions right now are fake news, and we need to call them as they are. So it's not just the social media, but of course in the social media there is an aspect that is very different. Is the what is called virality. No, so if a content goes viral, then a lot of people will believe that this is actually true, and they think this could be very bad because it's the way the narrative also is built, but this could be also very powerful. And right now what's going on is that there's going to this European reaction is building up also thanks to this narrative. So for example, in the morning when I when I need news on what's happening in Ukraine, I can go on Instagram, I can go on Twitter, and I know that there are people that I know, Ukrainian friends or people that are in touch with their parents and relatives in Ukraine that are sharing videos, photos, and etc. So also this chain of solidarity is going on. Social media are not bad or good; they're an instrument. As all the instrument needs to be controlled. So that's why, on one end, it's very important to fight any kind of fake news, of violent messages, and this kind of things. That this has to be done at institutional level. This has to be done with the enterprises, with Meta, with Twitter, and so on. As much as it has to be done with private televisions and so on. And on the other end, again, is how people can actually help each other. And this is what we are now experiencing, I guess, even if, of course, you're exposed to all the diversity of thinking, and there are still people who support Putin. Honestly, I cannot justify that position given the reality we are facing. At a certain point, you need to choose your side, but yes, I mean, fighting again. It's not that I'm saying anything revolutionary, but fighting fake news is always a good idea.
So coming to the last question for you first, what are the lessons or a short summary of lessons that can be learned from your perspective for the European Union, for each of us out of this conflict especially?
Well, to continuing something that the professor was saying, every opportunity is lost. We lost the opportunity to ensure and to a safe transition with the Eastern Partnership, and now we are facing the consequences. And we are facing the consequences now in Ukraine, as we are facing the consequences now in Belarus, because now everyone is forgetting that in Belarus, same things are happening. It's just that the president is not fighting on the side of the people, he's just fighting on the side of Putin, but it's exactly the same that's happening there. So when it comes to the project, now you said the project needs to be adapted. I think we are now in a phase where we need to step up, and it's no middle ground between stepping up or not. We already tried to do these halfway things. We tried for decades to have the euro, but without the political ability to actually decide on economic policies and so on. And this is not working because at stake is our European model. So the social state, as we call it in Europe, the democracy itself. We, as Jeff, launched 16 years ago a campaign that is called Democracy Under Pressure, and this is happening also beyond Ukraine, because actually what we stand for is threatened. It's threatened because there are other models in the world, and we cannot expect that European people like Ukraine and us has to be defended by the United States. We cannot expect that China needs to step up to face Russia, or need to step up to protect our pensions and etc. So everything is connected. We don't have to have just different clusters and thinking cluster. What's happening in Ukraine is connected to climate change because it's connected also to natural gas, oil, and the model of development that we have, as well as it's connected with digital revolution. We've talked about fake news and so on. It's connected with actually political ability of the European Union to have its voice in the world. With the crisis of multilateralism, a lot of things can be said. So just to wrap up, I think now it's very important to face the situation and to use this. Last month there's been the idea launched by Macron first and then by the European Commission in 2019 to say, let's have a conference on the future of Europe because we need to tackle the problem that the European Union has. Then 2020, the pandemic. Now in 2022, the war in Ukraine. If these kind of events are not going to make us, to cause a big leap when it comes to the European integration process, honestly, what are we waiting for? So I think we need really, really strongly to campaign for that, to keep supporting Ukrainian people, to keep supporting all the organization, all the demonstration, and etc. But we need to have also in mind that if we don't campaign for a political Europe now, we'll just have to wait and cheer for a president of the United States or another, or a president of the Republic of China or another, or whatever, and we'll be just reacting to what happens in the world and not trying instead to put things on a path of freedom, democracy, and peace.
Thank you so much. Dr. van den Boom, your closing statement, lessons to be learned, outlooks to be given, please.
Yeah, I would like to add something to what Antonio said, because there's another discussion we have been avoiding for the last years, and it is now very clear that it was a big mistake as well, and that is that after a certain point we stopped talking about the expansion of the European Union. We had a good number of new members after the end of the Cold War, and I know, yes, again, there have been mistakes made, and there have been blunders, and there have been problems, and many of these problems have not been solved. But we use this as an excuse to disallow new members to even have hope and optimism that one day they will be members. We put conditions on countries like Albania and Kosovo and others who have been waiting outside for quite a long time. And they tried very much to fulfill all the conditions. And even if they do, then we still have to wait, and they still have to wait, and we cannot give them a perspective. And now, today, as we are recording this discussion, the Ukraine has officially applied for membership for the European Union. And they are saying, okay, let us do it. And Mrs. von der Leyen has said, yes, they are part of the European family, and they should be. And I'm a little bit afraid that when the crisis is one way or the other over, and we are then seriously considering Ukraine's status, we will go down into the normal administrative and bureaucratic process of endlessly discussing details, instead of looking at the greater picture and the question about, is there a European vision behind it? And does it mean that sometimes we have to accept certain things we otherwise wouldn't in order to fulfill this European vision? And I think we have to read open the discussion about expansion, about the conditions of expansion, about the maybe different grades of membership you can have, so that you can be a member but then develop to a certain level within the European Union, but to make sure that you're already inside, so that you are in this molding form like a cake, yeah, so you can be part of that instead of being outside and being victim to other forces we don't like very much, not only the Russian Federation. And if we have to rethink our attitude towards expansion of the European Union. And I think the Ukraine crisis has clearly shown that our discussion in the last 10, 15 years has not been constructive in that regard.
Thank you very much, both of you, for this really interesting half hour, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Union of European Federalists.